Yeah, it's going to be one of those conversations. Yo, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Office Hours. I'm Nora. That's Sto, whichever direction he's on.
Right.
And normally we talk about practical advice for independent artists. Both Sto and I have been in the music industry for a really, really long time. Sto is a master at bios and like press kits and things like that. I've done management work and like strategy and consulting. But every now and then we start talking about the NBA, and today might be a little bit of that. We're also talking today about just the things that inspire us. Where do we find inspiration in the role of like visual arts and music? So kind of an open conversation today, but as always, please hit the subscribe button, comment, whether it's on this episode or any of the other episodes. If you ever have questions, either on things you want us to respond to or things that you want to see in the future, let us know, because we want to create episodes that are useful to you. There's something like 25 things if you want to look back on things we've done in the past. Also on the 22nd and the 24th, Sto and I are teaching, we're doing our newsletter workshop again, where we cover all the basics of like, how do you get started? How do you write newsletters that people care about, want to read, come back to? How do you grow your list? Like all of that stuff. And you leave with an actual like outline or draft of your first or next email blast. So check that out. The first 5 people to sign up get a super, super, super discounted rate. So the link for that is in the bio. You can also find it through me, find it through Sto. But we're talking, Sto is just telling me why he used to like James Harden and now does not like James Harden, which started all from a question of, I asked Sto how he thought about Paul Pierce getting fired. So follow along.
Right. We'll get back into all that. I still have to know what actually happened. But my beef with James Harden, he gets drafted out of Arizona State, super hustler player, grabbing rebounds, was underrated in Oklahoma City. They didn't give him enough playing time. I felt he asked for a bigger contract. They didn't want to give it to him, even though I felt he deserved it. He went to Houston, started taking over the world. I'm like, all right, finally, it's time. James Harden's going to show the entire world what's going to happen. And then a young man named Steph Curry came along and destroyed everything. So I can't remember what year it was, but it was either the second round or the Western Conference Finals, whichever one it was. I think it was actually the final game of the series, like game 6 or 7. James Harden doesn't score a goddamn point, not a single point or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but it was either that or he just had like, do you even want to play basketball, bro? Like, what's even going on? And it's just since that moment, it's just been just downhill. He's just been trying to, get triple doubles. I'm willing to admit he's trying to get chips, but like, he was playing with the front office. I want this player. No, wait a minute. I want this player. Oh, wait a minute. We don't get along either. I want that player. He even brought Russell Westbrook, his fucking homie, and it still didn't work.
But okay. So if that's the reason why he's not the only, your favorite LeBron is doing the exact same thing. So why does James Harden get why are we treating James Harden differently than we're treating LeBron?
First off, LeBron is a legend and has 4 rings now or something, 3 or 4 rings. Come on. James Harden doesn't even know what a finals looks like. Okay, come on. Like, let's stop this. Come on. I want to see James Harden win. He deserves a ring. And honestly, the thing is, when it comes to asking for players, is like LeBron, sure, he was like, yo, I need this dude. I need this dude. But notice the minute he got AD, boom, ring 1. James Harden's like, I want Chris Paul. Nah, that ain't going to work out. I need Clint Capella. Nah, that ain't going to work. Get him out of here. I don't even want Clint Capella no more. Get him out of here. Bring Russell Westbrook. Even my own friend, Russell Westbrook. That's what I knew it was a wrap. It's like, come on, bro. What are we? And now you have to get with KD and Kyrie. That's the only way you're going to beat LeBron James, who's almost 50 years old at this point. Come on.
Don't forget they have Rondo now. No, Rondo went to the Clippers. Never mind. I'm just so excited that Rondo's on the team that I like. But that's anyways. I mean, okay, there's 2 things that come up for me. And one is this pressure that we put on star players. And actually, it's not too different from music, where like we put pressure on star players to do everything, and we forget that it's like a team sport in the same way that music is a team sport. Right. And we put all the pressure on the artist and the performer to like do all the things. And so James Harden didn't lose by himself.
I agree.
The same way that LeBron didn't win by himself.
I absolutely agree.
LeBron and AD didn't win by themselves. And there's all these people on the court, which is like the metaphor to being like on stage, but also all the people behind the scenes who like make shit happen, right? Like LeBron's not keeping his body healthy by himself. Right. There's a whole slew of like
just for his body, right? Absolutely.
And so I think we forget that when we put all the pressure on athletes like by themselves. Like Harden didn't lose the ring, right. And I honestly, like, you know how I feel about LeBron, and James Harden isn't my favorite person either. But that like individualism,
if I hear any more LeBron slander, I'm gonna lose it. I'm gonna lose it live.
I didn't say anything bad.
Right.
What was the other thing I was gonna say? I don't know. I don't remember. Hey, what's up, Lorenzo? Shout out to Lorenzo, who's been an awesome supporter. Y'all should check out.
To tie it back into Paul Pierce.
Yes. Okay, that's what I was gonna do, to tie it back into Paul Pierce, because the way we got here was I asked Sto how he felt about Paul Pierce getting fired. And Sto said it wasn't that different from James Harden. Like what Paul Pierce did wasn't that different than what James Harden did, which I pointed out there were some differences.
I still don't even know the full story, to be completely frank.
But still, that's the whole story. He was at a party, there were strippers and they were high and they were drinking or intoxicated, and ESPN, and they parted ways. Ways. And I think that there is very much a double standard that we see in like entertainment and sports, where like two people can do the exact same thing and somebody gets like fired and pushed out, and somebody else, Sandroid says, I would like to hear the slander.
Oh man, on another podcast or something for sure. You don't want me going off for an hour. We'll never get anywhere.
This is one of those areas Sto and I just like, I respect Sto's appreciation of LeBron. No, but I do think there's a double standard. And I wonder, you know, I think sometimes certain people get treated differently than other people do for like the same thing. And I think a lot of it ties into what we think of as their like capitalistic value. Right? Like LeBron gets away with things because he brings in a lot of money. So, all right, cool, that's fine. Versus someone else gets criticized because they're not as like quote unquote high value.
Right.
And we see that play out in all kinds of different ways. And so I mean, I don't know, maybe there was things going on behind.
Was there any like statement by like ESPN or anything like that? I'll have to look into that, because listen, I'm gonna be real. I don't like Paul Pierce either. So, I saw like a little bit of it, and that's just like Cleveland stuff. That's all that is. So I don't know what actually happened. I actually thought when I saw it, what was that, yesterday? 2 days ago? I don't remember, but I honestly thought it was just because like media ratings like weren't in his favor, because I feel like every time I see him say something in pregame or whatever, it's always just like, are you even watching basketball, Paul Pierce? Like, what's going on? Maybe he's watching ball in the clubs. Maybe that's what's happening. And if that's the case, that explains his commentary sometimes. But if it was literally just because you were on IG, I think that's kind of weird. I do think that's kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, it was my only thought, and the conversation has been that because he's on ESPN is owned by Disney. Disney is super like strict and family and stuff, which to me is like super like slut shamey and like sex negative.
And it seems very case by case basis.
Yeah.
Because like, I'm pretty sure I remember, what's his name? John Boyega, like going off on Disney being like, I'm gonna do what I want. If I want to be in the clubs, I'm gonna be in the clubs. And like, they were just like, all right. So I think it's weird that like Paul Pierce can't do that. And it's just, and it doesn't, I do remember seeing there weren't a lot of people on the live either. So it's just like, what was the big deal? It just sounds like, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it was like just an excuse to get him out of there. That I would not be surprised. And that's even more messed up. So.
That says a lot about how terrible you think he is.
Paul Pierce?
Yeah.
No, I'm saying like in terms just as a commentator, not as a person. Like as a person, I'm sure Paul Pierce is like whatever. I'm sure he does his thing, but I mean like I'm telling you, like he'd be talking on pregame and people would just be slam dunking him. So I could see ESPN being like, all right, we have to figure out a reason to get him out of here. Let's use this. Like,
oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Like,
mean,
because that's weird. Like, I genuinely think that's weird that just over an IG live that not many people were watching. They just like, whoops, see you later.
yeah, I don't know. It just makes me wonder, like, what that decision process was. It just seemed to me, I didn't see anything that was super scandalous. And so I was like, anyways, y'all, welcome to Office Hours. Sometimes Sto and I get into these basketball conversations. We check in and we start talking about basketball and it trickles into the episode. But we're talking today about art and inspiration and like visual arts, especially. And so feel free as we're talking today, please drop into the comments any questions you have, your own ideas on this topic. But I don't know, I thought we'd start with the question, Sto, of like, what, I don't know where I want to start. Like, I'm kind of curious what your relationship growing up was to art and visual arts and like painters or graphic artists or things like, where did that come from for you? What was it like for you?
Right. Yeah. I mean, from like a visual standpoint, I can't say like I was exposed to a lot until really college, I guess. I mean, some field trips and stuff like that, but a lot of my stuff was just like through writing and wanting to experiment through writing myself. Poems, my own raps, short stories about like my actual life experience, like with like a slight comedic twist, so it's not so depressing, like all that stuff to just express myself and whatnot. So now, like, I don't know. Now I feel like I do have a semi-different relationship with art because I guess I understand more that just how wide it actually goes. Like I think growing up, we're so stuck in these little circles. Like even growing up, like I was like, oh yeah, like if it's not underground, like rap and like all this, like I ain't even listening to it, I'm not looking at it. I remember kind of like thinking like obviously like certain paintings and stuff was cool looking or whatever, but I never really like expressed that, or like I even remember being like, oh, well, if you're into paintings, like you're weird and like all this other stuff. So now that I understand that it's a lot more than just what I've been exposed to, there's just so much art out there that I can't even like imagine with my own like mind and stuff like that. It's just, I don't know. It's just opened up, I guess, my appreciation and just understanding that everything really genuinely is art. I don't know. There's this weird Twitter conversation going on today about like the type of rap that's out there and what you should and shouldn't like and stuff like that. And to that, I like, there's literally like maybe 1% of rap that I'm like, okay, maybe, but I've never understood this obsession with just like, gatekeeping might be the best word, but I don't even know if that's right. Like, you have to like we all have to have, because I want to be talking to people sometimes. Like, what if we all did have the exact same taste? That would be weird. Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, we shouldn't have the same, rank rappers. We should all have like a different appreciation for all the stuff that's going on. I'm trying to like understand more about like painting and stuff like that. Like, not myself. There's no way. But like just the process and everything that goes into it. I don't know. I think it helps even with what we do, just having like a deeper appreciation for just the various and plethora, unlimited kinds of art that's out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I grew up kind of in an opposite situation from you. So my dad is an artist. And when we came from Iran, like the one thing that he really brought with him was like when we first came, we had like a tiny ass 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment. So like 2 little kids, my parents, and my dad turns the 1 bathroom into a freaking dark room. Jeez. And so like I knew that I couldn't just like go in there, right? Because he might be developing film. And then later he like built himself a little art studio, and we always had paintings, and where like other parents would take their kids to the park, or like, my dad would take us to museums. and art galleries and be like, and it wasn't even like, oh, look at the pretty pictures. He'd make us stand there in front of a painting and he'd explain like the form and the composition.
Yeah.
I'm like, can we just go play?
Can
like,
we just go do something? Like, damn.
But like now like, where do I want to go on a Sunday afternoon? I want to go to the museum.
Yeah.
So it's something that he really like instilled in me. And growing up, people would ask me, well, like, are you an artist? And I really thought that the only way to be an artist was to be an artist like my dad. And so I didn't recognize my creativity in the same ways until much later, that I was like, oh shit, like I can write and I can connect people and I can do all these things. And that in itself is a form of artistic expression.
Yeah.
And so for me, like I love art. And like, whenever I go to a new city, the first thing I do is like, check out the graffiti.
Yeah. It's one of my favorite things to do. Yeah.
You know, and look at like what the city is telling me, but also like what, you know, all that kind of like nerdy, like I'm such an art nerd. And so one of the things that as I get older and like more into these creative spaces, what I'm starting to realize is that we don't experience anything with just one sense, right? I'm not just listening to music. I'm not just like seeing art, but that we really are, even though we might not always be conscious of it, it really is like a multisensory experience when you're experiencing whatever it is in terms of art. And so when I work with artists and we talk about like, what's the campaign rollout going to look like? Or how are you communicating? Like, other than telling me to listen to your song, what are you communicating to me? And what it always comes back to is the power of the visual. Like, what's the album art look like? What are your videos like? What's the messaging? Because we are hearing things, but we're also seeing things and we're also like experiencing things on so many levels. And so, for me, like art has such a, I don't know, it has like such a high place in art broadly defined, right? Like
exactly.
Right.
Right. It's so hard to like even pin it down anywhere.
Yeah. Right. And I think one of the things is like how inaccessible it's been for like music was easily accessible, right? I could turn on the radio, but like art in the traditional sense, like wasn't always accessible. And so I don't know, I think about for like even musicians thinking about how to play with that visual element can be another canvas to like engage your audience with. Are there artists that you like love or that inspire you or that you see?
Yeah, absolutely. Like it's what's also interesting because I've like even over the last like maybe 13 years or so, like I've gotten really into photography as well. And like especially with these phones that take such high quality pictures, like it's so like I love going places and like taking pictures when I can. But in terms of like I mean visual artists, honestly, there aren't.
Wait, hold on.
What?
So I don't think that I ever knew that you're a photographer.
Well, I'm not a photographer. I like to take pictures. That's all.
Okay. I didn't know. And you just like skimmed. It's like, because it's in the same way that you're like, well, I don't know if people know I make music. And now here we are learning Sto has yet another talent.
Oh, no.
Like, you just like said that real quickly. But okay, all right. Sto the photographer. Go ahead.
No, never that. I take pictures sometimes. I like to edit them, whatever. But you know, album art, a lot of album art, it inspires me, to be completely honest. And even as I say that, it's like, damn, sometimes I don't really take the time to really look at who's designing the covers and whatnot. But one artist that stuck out to me, honestly, over the last few years is Al Divino. I don't know where he's from, to be completely honest. He's a rapper, but he does a lot of graffiti and does a lot of like just like overall like just paintings and just, I don't know, it's stuff I've never seen before, to be completely honest. And you know, he'll tag almost anything. That's what also kind of amazes me, is like I would love to just be a fly on the wall, like for any of these artists that are tagging stuff, because it's like when are you doing this, first off, and how do you do, like there's no way. There's like because you see the height of some of them. Like, there's no way some of them are coming out with ladders. I've seen cats. I've been with cats sometimes when they're climbing up walls and doing all this insane stuff. So, like, that type of art, I think, is just so crazy because I don't feel like it's like we talk about graffiti like it's high caliber and stuff like that, but it's just when you look at the mainstream, it's just people think it's cool or whatever and niche. But I don't know. Some of those cats should be getting paid because it's insane seeing some of the art. But yeah, like I said, album art really inspires me. Even to the point now where it's like, I mean, obviously I buy records that like I personally enjoy, but if I see something that has a really cool like cover, I'll buy it because it's just like there has to be something cool going on here. So yeah, I think I've grown a greater appreciation for like visual art over the years. But again, even as we have this conversation, it's just like there's always still so much to learn and to like research and actually like become a fan of and stuff like that.
Yeah. What you mentioned about graffiti makes me like, one of the things I love about graffiti is the way, or street art, is the way that it takes, like, it turns everything into a space for artistic consumption. So rather than like going to the gallery, going to the museum,
exactly.
it breaks down these ideas of like inside, outside, and where art can happen. And I think, especially with the pandemic and the ways that people have had to get creative with the ways that like music happens, there's an invitation, I think, for artists to think about the same thing in terms of like, where can music consumption happen? And how can it happen in different ways where it's not like, dude, okay, I'm listening, especially now if people can't go to a concert, can't go to a show.
Yeah.
What does it look like to make a more experiential experience where you bring music to the people, right? Like a pop-up event or
we were
like
just talking about that at the label. Yeah.
Right. Like just these different ways of, in some ways, and this, I think, especially with genres of like hip hop, where it's like always pushing boundaries and like doing such different things, challenging barriers and like all of that stuff. But yet the way we experience the music is always still the same way. Like that hasn't changed. Right. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there to think differently about what would the graffiti equivalent of a music experience be. Right. So I don't know. That's the thing that came up for me when I heard you talk about that. And they make a shit ton of money. Like some of those, like once you become like graffiti. Oh,
like the prints and stuff like that.
Yeah. Like once you become graffiti famous, right? Like then you make like tons and tons, like, right? You go from like people trying to buff your shit to like making hella money. Which is a whole other, conversation that we could have. Yeah, but go ahead.
What art inspires you? You didn't tell us what art really inspires you.
That is a good question. I really like, I more and more have been getting into old, like, well, it's not even that old, but like, I really like modern art. And I'm really interested. And I think when we think about like modern art, there's a ton of men whose names like come up, like, everyone talks about. And I've recently been starting to look at like, who are the women in that era and who are the women. And there's a ton of women who are making incredible art, who were part of those scenes, who were, like, and what I love about artistic movements is they're like associated with, there's like a philosophical idea behind them. They're not just like painting, but it's a commentary on something. So there are women who are like leading this like thought leadership, but no one's looking at their art. Like no one's talking about their art because the men have gotten more shine or recognition. And so that's been really interesting for me to learn about and look at. And so that inspires me. And then, it's me. So like the politics around art.
Right. Of course.
Inspires me and how like things get priced. I watched a documentary recently about this art gallery that bought a whole bunch of forgeries. Didn't know they were forgeries. So people were buying these like artists for like $17 million, like just hella money. And then as soon as they found out they were fakes, then obviously they all dropped in value.
Right.
You know, I get into thinking, well, like, what changes the value of something? And is it that this was a good piece, or it's only a good piece because so-and-so artist? Is it the clout that gives it value, or is it the actual art itself that has value? So stuff like that, those kinds of conversations really, really inspire me. And then, you know, there's artists who are like, I love Salvador Dali and the surrealists and stuff like that. So for me, it's like not just the art itself, but also the stories and the politics around the art that really, like, I could go on about a lot of this for a really long time.
Absolutely. No, and I think that's what's, like, you know, just beautiful about this existence in general, is that there are those stories behind all of this art, and it's not just strictly auditory or visual or whatever. It's all of those senses combined. And then, you know, even down the line, when you start talking to people about it and stuff like that, that's even more commentary and stuff like that. So yeah. You know, there's so many dimensions to art in general.
It's even like when I think about the best merch that I've seen.
Yeah.
Is never the merch that says like the artist's name.
Right.
Right. The best merch that I've seen is like visually interesting.
Visually, always.
And so I think a lot of artists are like, music is my platform. And yes, for sure it is. But here you have so many other canvases of expression and ways to like communicate your story and build your audience. And I think merch is one of those places where it's just a missed opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. Definitely.
It's just a missed, and I'm not saying you have to be like Vincent van Gogh up on it, right? But thinking a little bit more complexly about how you can communicate what you want to communicate, or how can you create something that people will want to share and that can be a conversation piece or a think piece. And I think in the same way that you talk about like album covers, and I'm sure there's like, I think that's some of my favorite covers, and I'm like, it told a story, it made me feel something, right? Like maybe there's some, I don't even remember the album, but I remember the album art.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a missed opportunity, because so often we see merch that's just like someone's logo, but I don't want to, I don't want to be your billboard. I want to wear something that's a little bit more expressive.
That allows me to be your billboard. Freddie Gibbs killed it with his Alfredo merch line this time around for that Grammy album or nominated album. Incredible. He just kept like doubling down on it. I thought he was only going to do like, because at first it was just like, I think it was just like the name of that. It was just like Alfredo or whatever. But he did so many variations. He did like comic book cover variants, like anime looking style, like hoodies and stuff. Like one where like it was actually as though the two had a restaurant. Like all those creative ideas just, and that made me be like, hold up, I gotta get something from this right now. So. I agree like with you so much on like, if you just bring just a tad bit of creativity to it versus just my album, my artist name, whatever, like people will always buy a great design for sure.
So one of the things we've talked a lot about, I think, is like being an imperfect and stepping out of your comfort zone. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons why people shy away from stuff like that is you're comfortable in music and you're not comfortable in art. So you just stick with, and I get that. I get that. So for me, like one of the ways that I've tried to, what's up, India? What's up, reporting from 20? Welcome, y'all. We're just talking about art. So if you have like a favorite artist or designer, someone you want to drop in the comments or any, feel free to join the conversation. But for me, one of the ways that because I know I'm such a perfectionist, and I have so much anxiety, and I want things to be perfect. Like the first time I do it, one of the things I started pushing myself to do was to draw and paint. And I went to the 99-cent store and I bought a shit ton of just like different paints. And I found like canvas at Ross, like hella on a budget. And I started to paint and allow it to be messy and sloppy. And I knew that no one was ever going to see it. Like it didn't matter what the final product was, but just to get myself into the practice of doing something that was super low risk, but that felt really uncomfortable and wasn't perfect, actually has been really helpful in helping me get over the perfectionism in other areas of my life. Like, I don't know that I could do office hours like this and be so like, to be recorded and be watched and to like, this scares me still.
Right.
And to be so imperfect if I hadn't practiced in those little ways. And so I think that there's value. I don't know, all that to say, I think there's value around just like creating for the sake of creativity and to find whatever your little outlet, I don't mean to say little in a dismissive way, whatever your like outlet is to do something that's creative, that's expressive, that's tangible, like to play with paint and paintbrushes and like, you know, to get us out of our heads and into the moment and into the experience. That process in itself to me is really inspiring.
No, I agree with everything you just said. You know, I do feel like more and more, all of us, myself included, have gotten more towards like, not even necessarily creating for consumption per se, but even just like you said, like, you know, perfection's sake or whatever. Like anytime I want to experiment with something else, like I'm like, what's the point? Like it's gonna suck anyway, so I'm not even gonna bother. But that experimentation and stuff like that, it's important.
Yeah. We've already been in here for half an hour, so
right.
Paul Pierce took up a lot of our conversation today.
Fair. I'm about to look it up and see what he's saying. I did see him tweet that even when I lose, I win. So something's up. I'm fine with that. I don't like Paul Pierce, the ball player, but Paul Pierce, the retiree, is a GOAT. I'm for it.
Final words today, Sto?
Yeah, just, you know, allow yourself to experiment, allow yourself to make mistakes when it comes to art, and allow yourself to make mistakes when expressing yourself through that art. None of us are perfect. And even when, like, I feel like I do this with myself all the time. It's like, I've been writing for so long that the minute I pivot to something else, I'm like, but I'm not as good as this as I am as a writer. What's the point? Oh, no, you're allowed to make those mistakes and experiment and do all that stuff, because I think it does allow an alternative outlet for everything. And it's okay if people don't see it. It's okay if you're not putting it all up on the internet and stuff like that. It's okay if it's just for you. You're allowed that. Give yourself that permission.
Yeah. And like your brain needs to rest. And so if all you do is work and grind and hustle and like you know, it's like if you're bodybuilding, you need rest days for your muscle to grow. And so when I think about like when I struggle with inspiration, the more I push it and try to force it, the more I feel stuck.
Exactly.
And so for me, like art is also a place of just not doing anything and relaxing. And then that's when inspiration comes in, is you got to give it that space. Shout out to everyone in the comments. Reporting says, I do a lot creatively and I still do while still not writing fiction or nonfiction. There's art in being a wordsmith, talking about others. Clay, I love, right? Like something about tangible. Anyways, y'all, we could talk about art all day. You know, feel free to share your like art successes with me and Sto, or not, and just do it for yourself. It's not for consumption, as we've said. Right. Please definitely press the like button.
Leave an algorithmic comment.
help us with the algorithm. But subscribe, and as always, let us know if you have any questions. And please remember, the first 5 people who sign up for our newsletter workshop get a super discounted rate. We got really good feedback about that last time, and so we're really excited to offer it again, because you can't trust the algorithm. The algorithm is not going to work in your favor, but everyone checks their email. So y'all, Indio, Sandroid, Reporting, Lorenzo, C. Smith, and thank you all so much for hanging out with us today. We will be back. We're here every first and third Tuesday of the month. We're on Instagram next week. We appreciate you, and thank y'all. See you next time.